Hi. So I thought I would pull from Philosophies of Art and Beauty. Just went for a walk and excuse my appearance. I should take my hair down. More presentable. Okay. Let's see. This is in place of a spirit reading, which I haven't really felt inclined to do. So this is Aristotle. I went to this line, 40, line 40. Of other statements in poetry, one may perhaps say, not that they are better than the truth, but that the fact was so at the time. Example given, the description of the arms. Their spears stood upright, butt end upon the ground, but that was the usual way of fixing them then, as it is still the Illyrians. As for the question whether something said or done in a poem is morally right or not, in dealing with that, one should consider not only the intrinsic quality of the actual word or deed, but also the person who says or does it, the person to whom he says or does it, the time, the means, and the motive of the agent, whether he does it to attain a greater good or to avoid a greater evil. Other criticisms one must meet by considering the language of the poet. Speaking generally, one has to justify the impossible by reference to the requirements of poetry, or to the better, or to the opinion. For the purposes of poetry, a convincing impossibility is preferable to an unconvincing possibility, and if men such as Zeuxis depicted be impossible, the answer is that it is better they should be like that, as the artist ought to improve on his model. Number two, the impossible or an improbable one has to justify either by showing it to be in accordance with opinion or by urging that at times it is not improbable. For there is probability of things happening also against probability. The contradictions found in the poet's language one should first test as one does an opponent's confutation in a dialectic argument so as to see whether he means the same thing in the same relation and in the same sense before admitting that he has contradicted either something he has said himself or what a man of sound sense assumes as true. But there is no possible apology for improbability of plot or depravity of character when they are not necessary and no use is made of them, like the improbability of the appearance of Aegeus in Medea and the baseness of the Menelaus in Orestes. The objections then of critics start with faults of five kinds. The allegation is always that something is either 1, impossible, 2, improbable, 3, corrupting, 4, contradictory, or 5, against technical correctness. The answer to these objections must be sought under one or other of the above-mentioned heads, which are 12 in number. That's ends at line 26. 26 goes on to say, the question may be raised whether the epic or the tragic is the higher form of imitation. It may be argued that the less vulgar of the higher, and the less vulgar is always that which addresses the better public, An art addressing any and every one is a very vulgar order. It is believed that their public cannot see the meaning unless they add something themselves that causes the perpetual movements of the performers, bad flute players, for instance, toiling about, if quite throwing, is to be represented, and pulling at the conductor, if Scylla is the subject of the piece. Tragedy, then, is said to be an art of this order, to be, in fact, just that, just what the latter actors were in the eyes of their predecessors. Meniscus used to call Gallipotides the ape, which he thought he so overreacted. He thought he so overacted his parts, and a similar view were taken in the Pindaris also. This is going to record. All tragedy, however, is said to stand in the epic as the answer to the older school of actors. The one, accordingly, is said to address the cultivated audience, which does not need the accompaniment of gesture. The other, the uncultivated one. If, therefore, tragedy is a vulgar art, it must clearly be lower than the epic. The answer to this is twofold. Well, I think maybe that's where I should end. That was on page 124, 123, 124, Aristotle.